attracting, nurturing, engaging, rewarding, and retaining talent. In fact, suggests that all people management strategies must be future proof, if not future forward. Therefore, bringing effectiveness to talent management becomes a top priority. In today's masterclass, we will learn how JSW has leveraged HR technology to craft a streamlined talent management system that is seamless and easy to execute, and how HR tech adoption has enabled better talent management practices for the team of 18,000 plus employees at JSW Group. So, without further ado, let me invite the speakers for today. First up, we have Mahesh Mal, Customer Success Head at Darwin Box. Mahesh has given new meaning to customer centricity by helping customers from myriad industries such as BFSI, manufacturing, IT, media to upscale and reach new heights. He has built an undying legacy with Darwin Box that is centered around long term, meaningful client relationships and customer loyalty. Prior to Darwin Box, Mahesh has worked with Infosys, Simpa Networks, and Additive in the head HR capacity, where he had a chance to work alongside CIOs and CXOs to drive talent management from the ground up. He has an MBA in Human Resources and Marketing from IIM Lucknow and a BTech degree in Electronics and Communications. Welcome, Mahesh. Our, ne-
Thanks for the
our next speaker is Rupam Singh, Vice President and Group Head Performance and Rewards at JSW Group. She's a leader and an advocate for everything human resources. Her rich experience with rewards and recognition, employee engagement, and HR tech makes her a master at people management. Prior to JSW, Rupam had the chance to enrich companies like IBM, Cipla, and Schindler with her immense knowledge of HR. As per her latest achievements, she was very recently recognized as a dynamic and emerging HR leader in ETHR World's 40 Under 40 list for 2022. Welcome, Rupam. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, Asmani.
So before we move to the discussion, a quick note to our attendees. Please keep up the momentum of the conversation with questions that you can post in the chat box. We will bring them up during the Q&A. Over to you, Mahesh.
Thanks a lot, Asmani, for your lovely introduction. I hope all of you are doing great and having a great Friday, and looking forward to the session where we'll talk about the journey that JSW undertook on their performance transformation journey. Before we start, I would talk a bit about Darwin Box and our talent management framework. Ayush, if you can move the slide ahead. Um Having rated number one enterprise cloud HCM on Gartner Peer Insights, and we are one of the fastest growing HCM technology partner. We are backed up by the likes of Lightspeed, Sequoia, TCV, and Salesforce Ventures, and recently have also gotten into the Gartner's Magic Quadrant. Not just that, we are the youngest and fastest ones to enter the quadrant, the only one from Asian origin, and have been rated the highest amongst the peer insight. Moving on, to give you a little bit more idea on which space we operate in. Currently, we are working with 700 plus clients across 90 countries. As we speak, there are 1.5 million employees across our client base that use Darwin Box on a day-to-day basis to make their life simpler. Let's move on and talk a bit about the performance management framework at Darwin Box. Traditionally, talent management has always, not always, traditionally, talent management has been about performance measurement and not performance management. However, the last decade has seen a dramatic shift in the talent landscape, and that's where the need of systemic changes also evolved. Uh, in line with the trend about 10 years back, 15 years back, the primitive systems used to focus only on performance measurement and used to measure employee productivity and employee performance like machines on an assembly line. Thankfully, those days are behind us, and we have moved forward in the journey where we have a holistic performance management. And fortunately, the architects of talent management framework at Darwin Box also agreed and developed that in the framework that we have created. Uh, the talent ecosystem in Darwinbox focuses majorly on five aspects: talent strategy and planning, employee performance management, talent development, succession planning, identifying, and merit planning. While I can spend a lot of times talking about the 30 plus submodules that power our five pillars of the talent ecosystem, uh, here's a question to ponder over. Would you rather work in an organization which uh, measures your performance maybe at the end of the year or at max twice a year, or work with an organization which works with you on a customized development plan and elevates organization performance alongside with your performance? And I hope all of you would agree to the latter than the former. And that's how you win the talent war, by investing in talent development rather than just using a measuring stick to evaluate performance. This becomes a lot more important because with every day passing, more and more Gen Zs are entering the workforce, and it becomes a lot. And this is something that the Gen Zs also value. Also, as a group of new age HR practitioners, this is our responsibility to make this shift in our workplaces. At Darwinbox, we enable that through a host of features that range from goal and competency framework to frequent check-ins for continuous performance management, succession planning, IDP, and so on. Uh, uh, Ayush, can we move on to the next slide? And all these modules are linked in very, very tightly together. So the core performance management talks to the project-based PMS, 360-degree feedback. The core performance management system also talks about continuous performance management in an MBO framework, and frequent check-ins for ensuring that there is incident-based performance management in an OKR framework. There are other aspects of our performance management like NGRADE, IDP, succession planning, which are tightly linked to our core performance management system. So that's the overall architecture of Darwinbox's performance management ecosystem. We'll now move on and talk about as to what is it that we are going to cover in the session. So far, we have spoken about the talent ecosystem at Darwinbox and about Darwinbox. We'll learn a bit more about JSW and its performance management journey through its philosophy, learnings, challenges, role of tech, and learnings for the rest of the group. But before we move on, I would want to understand from all of you, and there's a quick poll that we would want to do. Uh, are you aware of your organization's performance philosophy or talent strategy? This question will also pop up in your chat windows. Please take about 10 to 15 seconds and answer that. We request all the participants to go to the website www.menti.com and use the code pasted in the chat link itself and share their feedback on whether or not they are aware of their organization's performance philosophy. We'll wait for about 10 more seconds before we move ahead. So while I'm very glad to see that while the sample set is very small, most of the participants are aware of the organization's performance philosophy. For those who have selected no, I would urge you to go and talk to the talent management team and get a deeper understanding of your performance philosophy, because the actions, the processes would be driven by what your organization's performance philosophy would be. Asmani, can we get back to the presentation, please? So with this, I would now hand it over to Rupam and request her to talk a bit about JSW and an overview of the performance management uh, in the current cycle.
Thanks, Mahesh. Can we quickly move on to the next slide? Yeah, for the sake of audience, good afternoon. JSW Group is a $22 billion conglomerate having its presence in the core sector. Now, what I mean by core sector is basically metal, mining, chemical, all of that. So, JSW Steel is one company which is into steel producing. We have a company called JSW Energy, which is into generation of power through hydrothermal as well as renewable sources. We have JSW Cement, which is a cement company. We have a company called JSW Infrastructure, which is primarily into ports management. We have JSW Paints. We have a company called JSW Foundation. This company is primarily into the social development, social capital development for and into the CSR activities, which is coming from all the other companies' budgets. We have a new tech, a new age company which is primarily focused into startup. It's a venture capital fund called JSW Ventures. We have one very special company with us, which is one of the very diversified kind of a company, which is called JSW Sports, because for our organization, the sports, the fitness, whether it is mental, physical, financial, all of these are very, very close to our heart. And JSW Sports basically owns Delhi Capital IPL team, FC Bengaluru. We have been training a lot of our Olympians like Neeraj Chopra, Jitendra Punia, all of these guys. So JSW Sports is basically helping the nation develop the next line of sports for our Olympics and all other world sports event. So these are some of the companies where JSW is primarily present today. Can we just move on to the next slide? Now, giving a quick overview of what exactly is the spread of the manpower, in all these companies, we have a close to 30,000 on-roll employees. I'm not providing the details of employees which are on contract or on, third-party service model, because generally in a sector where we are operating, we have a huge workforce in coming from contract and outsource kind of a model. But these 30,000 employees are basically our on-roll employees. We have more than 3,000 managers, 400 plus HODs. We are spread across multiple different location in India, abroad, and we have a total of 45 legal entities, including our overseas entities. So this is the overall, scale of where our performance management gets executed, which we will talk about in the subsequent slides.
Uh, Thanks a lot, Rupam. I think that helped us understand the scale at which we are operating in. It We would be keen to understand as to what is the performance philosophy at JSW, what drives the processes, all the decisions that we were fortunate to partner with you on. Would love to hear that.
So performance philosophy, Mahesh, comes from the two aspect of it. One aspect is our talent management strategy. So if you look at the talent management strategy in JSW Group, the talent management is basically considered a business imperative, and it is an architecture which through which we deliver our aggressive business growth strategy with sustainable competitive advantage. What I mean by this is that in JSW there is a strong differentiation for the talent, and hence there is a lot of focus on how we manage our talent. Now that frames our talent strategy. Performance philosophy also comes from the overall reward philosophy of the group, where what we the philosophy is to be the market leader for our talent and to be at the market for the rest of the population, through which we kind of focus on employee development, the career development, and the career planning, all of these things. And these are the ones which clearly gets into our performance management framework. So our focus areas are on employee development through transparent and forward looking communication, as well as the performance to be the lead indicator for managing the rewards as well as the career planning. So that's how I would define the performance philosophy of JSW Group.
And makes a lot of sense now also, because we looked very closely at the decisions which were being taken during the process, and it helps tie the dots when we know what is the performance philosophy and what was driving it at the end of the day. Next, I think, Ayush, if you can move to the next slide. While we understood the philosophy, it would also be helpful for us to understand as to what was the starting point in the journey, what were the challenges that we were trying to address when we undertook Darwin Box's performance management module and wanted to execute the same.
So I think, Mahesh, most of these companies with COVID, with the kind of the ongoing external challenges that's going across the world, a lot of companies are relooking their processes, whether it is HR processes or business processes, and kind of taking a look at it in terms of understanding whatever these processes have helped them to achieve, is it sufficient, is it making sense for now, will we be able to continue with such processes going forward. And JSW found itself standing on the same level, asking these questions, that whether the way we have been managing our performances, whether the way, in the beginning you were talking about companies just investing in time for performance management and not doing, I mean, performance measurement, but not doing enough for performance management. So we were also on the same level, where we started looking whether the kind of performance processes, performance measurement processes that we were having was making sense or not. Will it help us to go where we want to reach in next 5 years, 10 years time? If you will look at the JSW growth, JSW has grown exponentially in the last 25 years. Like the kind of EBITDA growth or the revenue growth or even the capacity expansion, if you will look at, it has been humongous. Now keeping that kind of a pace with all the existing processes is something that is not going to happen. And hence we started relooking at the processes. One of the process that we start relooking at was performance management. So in performance management, there has to be continued focus on fairness and transparency, because if you will look at, we have a very team based architecture. There are a lot of milestone that business achieve, but individual contributions are very limited, and most of the contributions are team based. And hence it is important that we have a transparent performance management, so that each employee understands how their performance contributes to the business growth. And they consider their evaluation of performance as fair. So that was one thing. Second thing is how it is linked to our overall talent management, because if we are evaluating the performances and if it is not linked to the talent management, then there is a kind of a gap. While you may want to evaluate the performance, there was a very important factor of assessing continuous high performers in terms of potential, in terms of how much they are able to take the next level of roles. So that was another important point which we looked at when we were redesigning our performance management. And then third thing was the perfect balance of bringing contextualization with standardization. Not everything every company is doing is bad, okay? Not everything needs to be changed overnight. There are a lot of things which still make sense for us, even if it do not fit into the realm of the world that is going around us. However, why not to look at the best practices that's happening all around and see what makes sense for us? And hence that was also one of our thought process when we started relooking at our PMS system.
And I remembered very distinctly the times when we were discussing on which aspects of the performance management or calibrations have to be standard, have to be consistent across, while being very cognizant of the fact that there are differences in the entities that we are operating in. They have worked in a certain way, and hence it cannot be one size fits all. So really appreciate that you have also shared that with the rest of the group. And coming with so many legal entities, it was complicated, but yeah, that balance of contextualization and standardization we have closely watched and really appreciated. With that, I think and one of the things that we partnered very closely, Ayush, if you can move the slide, very closely, was on the technology front. What part did technology play in addressing those challenges? Would be great to understand that as well.
Yeah, so technology played a great part because given the size and the complexity of the organization, we were very focused on providing all our employees a seamless experience with our process. Many a times when you are operating on such a huge scale, and even if the process is flawless on paper, if it is not supported with the right set of technology, uh, each individual experience that process very differently, because there are so many hands executing those process. There is no single language of those processes, and hence it becomes a little challenging to pass on those seamless experience. But when the technology becomes your language, then the experience of the employees are seamless. Each employee see the process in a very same fashion, and hence technology was very crucial factor when we looked at our processes, which process to tweak, which process to improve, and how that will be executed in terms of letting people understand that how it has to be done for themselves, for others, as well as for the entire organization. So the one critical aspect which technology helped us in addressing was the communication part. So with technology, each employee was given the opportunity to capture the feedback. There were times when all managers, be it 33,000 managers, they were able to provide the timely feedback to all the employees. All these feedbacks were already captured when we were doing annual assessment of the performances, to highlight the gap and to remove any kind of biasness which generally comes when somebody has performed exceptionally well in the last month versus somebody who had a good run in the beginning of the year. Now when everything is at one place, the managers were able to kind of take a conscious call of how much the person has done, what kind of development areas, even for your top performers. So many a times, the messaging get lost for top performers, that oh, they are the best of the best, but they also have some development areas, and that can only come into picture when the entire year is flashed on the screen in front of employee as well as the manager. Second thing is, while when we were having these processes of the technology part, then the kind of insight used to come through a post-mortem analysis. Once the cycle is over, then we will look into everything. Okay, these are the gaps, these are the things. With technology, these are the immediate and the real time. You can look at the gaps of how one business is managing the entire process versus some other businesses. There could be the best work coming from one of the organization which can be replicated to some other organization. The kind of volume with the employees, so be it junior most employee to senior most employees, the way they were experiencing their development discussions with managers, with their top line leadership, was very seamless when it comes to managing it through the technology. Now third thing was the process part. There was minimal deviations wherever required, and technology also enabled us to accommodate the nuances wherever it was required. So it was not like that a rule book was written and only this is the way that we have to go about it. It helped you to accommodate one company which is in the growth phase. For example, cement and paints for us is growing organization, whereas steel and energy are already matured organization. Paint is a sales driven organization, whereas steel is hardcore manufacturing and operation. So all these small nuances of different organization, the complexity that comes onto the process part was very easy to manage when it is supported through a right technology, I would say. So these were some of the help that we got through the technology platform of DB that we use for our performance management processes.
And a couple of things, Rupam, that you also mentioned, like having nuances, which having a system which understands the nuance between different businesses and accommodates that is extremely crucial, because you can't have the same rule for all. One more very critical thing that you mentioned at the start of the role of technology was that if my performance has been great in the last month versus at the start of the cycle, how do we remove that? And I still remember from when we used to study HR, and how do you remove recency bias? And there are two specific things in Darwin, two specific features in Darwin box that enable the critical incident method, where I jot down as to what are the events that have been happening over the year, have a conversation with my manager around the same. And one of them, which supports the MBO framework, is the journal, where I can keep on mentioning as to what my achievements have been through the years, and not have to scroll through all my mails, or what I have done at the end of the year. Second, again, in an OKRs kind of a scenario, which is more continuous performance management, having check-ins, regular check-ins, and system ensuring that we have the flexibility of employee manager or system-driven check-ins is something that helps remove that recency bias as well. So I think that was also very well utilized, the journal feature, uh, to ensure that we reduce the recency bias. Obviously, we can work towards reducing it over cycles. Uh, so with that, I think we'll also want to talk about, and Ayush, if you can move the slide. There would be, and it's a continuously evolving process. I have seen performance processes which have also spanned across, which have evolved over 20 years, and there are still scope of improvement, not because the processes are flawed, but context keeps on changing. And as you said, paints and cements which were in the growth phase might have a different approach in the upcoming cycle. So, what are the learnings? What is it that you would recommend to the participants of this webinar from the performance management system at JSW?
Okay, so one piece of advice that I would probably want to pass on to all the candidates who are, all participants who are listening right now to me is, we tend to take performance management process and HR process. This is not an HR process. You have to let your business know that it is a business process. HR is facilitating this process because it comes under the ambit of HR. It is to do with employees and all of that, but it has to be owned up by the business. And I think in our case that was the biggest plus. Our management was involved in this process, running this process. They were the one who initially brought this on the table, that are we doing the right things? Till now everything is working for us, but do you think that just because not enough people are saying that your performance management sucks, we are just taking that it is everything is all right? Do you want to really look at it? And I think that was the starting point where we started relooking at the whole process. What are the processes that is completely managed by offline processes? Can we automate it? Can we improve employee experience through these sensitive processes? Performance management is, I think, is close to everybody's heart because it impacts the career planning of an employee. Organization get to have the talent pool created through this processes, whether it is performance, or whether it is potential assessment, or whatever kind of assessment we take on. An organization is getting the pool of talent, the employees are getting their career, their rewards done through these kind of processes. One of the biggest learning is, as I mentioned, that this process has to be run like a business process. The minute you start running it like an HR process, you are probably setting it up for failure, and hence it is important that it is run as a business process. That was one of my biggest learning. Second thing is, we have to also understand the appetite of change for the organization. uh,
Sorry, I
okay.
think there is some issue. I'll share my screen and
Okay.
sorry, just give us a couple of seconds. I think the team is resharing. But Rupam, I think one thing that I really agree to, and I have seen it across multiple performance management processes, is the fact that, and you rightly said that it has to run like a business process and not an HR process. While it comes under the ambit of HR, the there are far more implications on the organization's performance, very linked very closely to how we run it for the employees.
That's true. I mean, till a very long time, I think I have heard these comments from the different corridors that I have rated my employee very well, but there is a black box called bell curve where the rating goes and something change happens and it comes out. And I was like, no, that's not how it works. So people think that bell curve is the culprit, whereas if you look at the whole processes, when you are differentiating performances, I'm not talking about differentiating employees, I'm talking about when you are assessing performances, somebody would do better. If you are comparing relatively people's performance, there would be some kind of a curve that will get formed. Somebody will be on the top of the curve, somebody might be in the middle, or maybe at the bottom of the curve. The problem is not a curve getting created, the problem is on what things are getting highlighted as the behaviors which can be considered as the best behavior or best performances. What do you consider best performances? Are you consider the impact, the results, the efforts? So that philosophy has to very clear from an organization, that what do you reward? Do you want to reward an outcome, or do you want to reward an output? So these are the two things that an organization has to think through before they want to relook at what's happening in the area of goal setting. What are the new ways of doing it, whether it is OKR or KPI? But more than that, I think the organization has to be very clear with what is their compensation philosophy, what is their reward philosophy. Once that gets established, the performance philosophy has to be established, and then you see what are the best thing available all across in the market, what will suit you. Maybe whatever you are doing is good enough, you continue to do that itself, and then you see if you can enhance the experience of the people by bringing technology into the picture. We go other way around, we pick up a technology first and then try to kind of size all things backward, and that's where I think lies the gap.
And I think that is also because a lot of times we hear snippets or read about snippets of how a particular philosophy worked wonders for a particular organization, and that might not be. That is again context based. We saw you spoke about how in the same conglomerate there were differences in how you would approach talent management, but yeah, those were the nuances which have to be looked at before deciding as to how do we design a process.
That's true.
I think we are still facing certain challenges with the deck, but nonetheless, I think that was one piece that you spoke about the leadership buy-in, which has to be very crucial for it to run like a business process. What also we wanted to speak about very briefly was, while in we work very closely with about 700 clients, and I and my team have specifically looked at the performance processes, were part of designing the same, executing the same for over 30 clients. And there are some things that again we would want to talk about after you have shared your learnings. Let's get back. I think, Akansha, let's get back to the slide.
I think it was next
Akansha,
slide.
it's the learnings 19 slide. If you can go back to that.
Okay. So from the learning perspective, as I said, it is very important that the organization ecosystem is to be evaluated first before you bring any technology or even an improvement in the process part, I would say. um, Mahesh, can I get started, or you want do
Yeah,
you
you
want
can you can start. Akansha, let's just keep stay on this slide.
Okay. So one thing is the culture part is very important, and hence you need to evaluate that. Second thing is who is bringing this change is also important. If as a bunch of HR team we gather together, put our head together and see, okay, we need to change the process or we need to bring a technology through which the people will be experiencing this process, then I think we are probably making a bit of a mistake over here. As per me, I think it is important that, as I said in the beginning, that this process has to be run as a business process. Hence, it is very important that people who are involved as the business managers, business leader, or even as an employee, they should be brought on board in terms of whether you are bringing any technology or any kind of a process improvement. So whether bringing a new platform to run your PMS, or changing the way you are doing performance management. For both these things, it is very important that you capture what your business would want to measure, because these things are very important. Third thing is right technology. Many a times, what I've seen is people seeing the demo of the products, or word of mouth. They heard that, okay, these teams have used this particular platform, and without thinking through, they just kind of start putting their process on the platform. We have to also understand that technology is here to make life simpler by making things faster, managing the volumes in a very agile way, giving you the insight which generally takes time to come on board, and helping you to do the fix which generally can't be done when these things are done offline. So it is very important to understand what kind of your reality is in terms of what all data will be required, whether you have those data or not. If you are kind of migrating some of the data from your previous system to the new system, there are a lot of checkpoints that need to be considered. And a process owner, whether it is a PMS process or whether it is any other HR process, whether it is talent management or whatever, the process owner has to own the entire process on the technology. Most of the time I have seen there is an HR tech team who will handle, who generally, for no, with no offense to any HR tech team member out here, but there are times when they do not understand the entire nitty-gritties of these processes. And that's why we have these different verticals. Somebody is a talent management expert, somebody is a comp expert, somebody is a hiring expert, because they are the one who knows these processes very well. They live these processes on an everyday basis. Hence it is important that these are the people who should be owning these processes on your platform, and then only you can bring all kind of plus minuses which are required to provide a seamless experience through the technology. And of course, a platform should be there which can accommodate the request which is suitable to your organization nuances. And there I would say DB has really done a very good job with us.
Very glad to
Very
hear
glad.
that. And in fact, when I was before you spoke about your learnings, and I would also want to share a couple of them, because from the mindset that we have worked at very closely, there are a couple of tech related learnings that we have that we want to share with the group. And I would break them down into, I think, four parts. One, define a starting point as to what is it that I want to achieve, and I'll go into detail in each one of them. Run the process with an iron fist, and that kind of also connects with what you mentioned of how it has to be run like a business process. Uh, this performance management as a process is continuously evolving for any organization because context changes, people who are joining the workforce changes, and many a times there's a better way of doing things, not all the times, but yeah. And then over invest in communication and trainings are the three four areas that I want to talk about. The first one, on starting point, we have to understand before we start off any performance management journey. We have to understand what are the challenges that I want to address. Let's say we have listed down five challenges that are there in the organization currently, and they have to be solved through a performance management process. And then bifurcate them into which part of those problems technology has to solve for, which part of that problem has to maybe come from a cultural change within the organization. Having that clarity helps sometimes, because then we have expectations from technology, right expectations from technology, and right expectations from what business HRs are supposed to do.
Correct.
That's where I think leadership buy-in plays a big role, because once we have set out the agenda objectives that we have for a particular process design, we can communicate that clearly with leadership, get their views also, because your leadership would come from a varied set of industries and experience, and you can improve upon the process there itself. The second part being uh, uh, running the process like a business process, which you mentioned. Nothing ruins a good performance management philosophy and a process like delays. And it is close to everyone's heart, not just because it is linked to ratings and payouts, etc., but it should be basic hygiene that we are giving feedback to the employees on time, working towards development going forward. And more often than not, what also ends up happening is that there are delays because certain businesses might not be doing it. But if there's the second part of leadership buy-in comes in here again, in case leaders are aligned, we will be able to drive with sacrosanct timelines for any performance process. The third part being continuously improving on any process. After every cycle, what we also recommend our clients and help them do is gather feedback on both technology front and on the process front as to what is it that managers and employees would want to see going forward. uh, that is on the feedback from the stakeholders. One of and in any performance cycle there'll be a set of data that you gather, and that also will be very insightful. A couple of examples of those could be that we compare as to what percentage of employees have ratings where the ratings are different from what I perceive my rating would be versus what manager has given. So that dissonance, and ideally we should try and reduce that dissonance. The second metric again that we look at closely and try to work on initiatives is what is the dissonance between manager rating and the final rating. Rupa, you
Correct.
mentioned that a lot of times business comes and mentions that there is this black box called calibration, and I feed in something into that and something else comes out. If as a manager I am enabled enough, empowered enough to understand how my team's performance and my performance is linking to organization performance, that dissonance will go out, and calibration, demonizing the calibration process will try and reduce. Again, intervention on the first part where I mentioned about dissonance between employee and perceived value of performance, perceived performance and actual performance. Maybe as an organization we can do a better job of explaining the employees as to what each of those KPIs or OKRs mean, and what is it that it will take me from what is it that will take me to move from a particular rating to B rating. So that
Correct.
was on the continuous improvement, and I can't emphasize enough on the last point that we have to over invest in communication and training. before the process starts, there has to, every stakeholder, let it be employee, manager, HODs, or maybe the HR team itself, should know as to what is it that I'm supposed to do, and how am I supposed to do it. One part, again, as the process is what am I supposed to do, how am I supposed to do is where the technology comes into play. And uh, wherever we partner with our clients, we ensure that there's enough communication that happens, not just through documentation but through sessions with the employees as well. It becomes a lot more important when we are running the process for the first time, and there is a major shift in how performance processes have been run. So I
Yeah,
think from a technology point of view and what we have seen across our clients, these are the four major learnings that we would have.
absolutely.
So I think with that, we also are almost towards the end of the session, and would be happy to take up a couple of questions. Would request all the participants to add any questions that they might have about JSW's process, about Darwinbox's talent management capabilities, or anything under the sun.
I think we already have two questions in the chat box. Mahesh, I'll take the first one. Maybe you can take up the second one.
Sure.
So the first question is: as we embrace hybrid working model, how can technology overcome the challenge of performance bias in distributed teams? I'll share this. I'll answer. I'll try to answer this question from my experience of one of my previous organization. So hybrid working model is generally most of the companies are experiencing right now, especially with the COVID and everything, changing into a hybrid model or maybe a remote model. There were companies which used to have global teams where remote or hybrid was the norm. And I remember in one of my last assignment, I was managing a team of 7 people who were spread across 6 different countries. Okay. And there are times when they used to work together, and there are times when they also used to have individual work. So the first important thing is, it is very very important that as a manager, if the managers are trained to track the work in a way which should improve the efficiency and productivity of the team, and also help them to deliver on the overall team objectives. So the first thing is, the regular check-ins, individual as well as group check-ins, are very very important, which you can completely manage it on the technology. There are multiple ways of collaboration tools are there through which you can work. You can make different team members work on a same project. There are ways to track their performances through those platforms. Even in a performance management setup, if you are doing a agile way of goal setting, like if there is a goal meant only for a quarterly, goals are there, because that the people are more on a project formats. In those kind of a team, you can have a quarterly goal setting format where you can assess the people how well they have done on individual responsibilities area, overall what has been the team performances, all of that. So the regular check-ins would be required when you are managing a hybrid team or a remote team, or the teams are spread across, or there could be a team who is working under different functional. So for example, there is a team member who is working for X function, there could be a team member who is working for a different function, or multiple, you can replace this with multiple clients. So in all these kind of things, I would say the way you are managing the performance management can help in managing their everyday productivity as well as everyday performances. The performance management has to be more in the flow of work rather than an annual affair. For such teams who are more on a project base, the teams which are on the long term projects but they are more working on a distributed team model, for them as well, multiple stakeholder responsible for one employees can also, so maybe a 360-degree kind of a feedback mechanism can be there for assessing the performance. And through that, you all of these things are enabled through technology. If you're managing it offline, it will just become way too humongous work, and it is just not doable. That would be my take on question number one, Mahesh.
Great. I'll take the second question. The second question that we have received is how it can HR Tech facilitate goal setting and growth opportunities for the new age workforce. I'm assuming that's workforce and not work for. Break that down into two parts. The first one as to how it can facilitate goal setting. While there is a lot of focus on the reviews and the year-end performance cycles, the most crucial part of the entire performance management process would be the goal setting, and I think a lot of people would agree to that. How technology can facilitate that is number one. We can ensure with technology you don't have to wait for the reviews to close and then spend 2 months again in the goal setting cycle. What I mean is, let's say we are at the end of the March and we are starting with the reviews on 1st of April. The reviews might take about 1 or 1.5 months to close, and if we start the goal setting in May mid and completed by June, 1 quarter of the entire year is gone. So what technology can do is do that in parallel while the reviews are also going on. There are also a couple of things that we read about how we should only have 4 to 5 KRAs, or how the weightages should not be. I should not have 10 goals with 555% weightage, because that essentially loses out the focus. So technology also ensures that all those rules are set into the system itself, and as soon as an employee is deviating from them, there are checks and balances to prevent that from happening. This enables or the HR team or the talent team to control the process in a much better way. That was answer to the first part of the question. The second part is how can both opportunities be provided to the employees, and this ties back to one of the features that I glanced upon very briefly of individual development plan. Usually, individual development plans are linked very closely to when the reviews are happening, and when you are talking about the previous year's performance with your manager, uh, that is the right moment when I can also talk about that these are the 4 areas that I need to work on. These are the 4 roles that I think I can grow into in the next 1 or 2 years. How technology helps that, we can have a separate conversation during the review itself, where we document that, link that to a couple of learning activities, and then follow that through the year. uh, if it is not done in a timely fashion along with the reviews, there are chances of about 40 to 50% of these conversation being dropped. So that's how I think HR tech can facilitate goal setting and the growth opportunities for the new age workforce.
Okay. So, Mahesh, in the paucity of time, I'll take question number 4 and 5 together, and
Sure.
then probably we can come back on question number 3. So, four question number is, what could be the best or most feasible rating scale? Okay, I'll quickly answer this one. Okay, this, there is no best or most feasible rating scale. I'll give you an example from my industry right now. Tata Steel, most of you would have heard the name of this company. They follow a 6 point rating scale. Okay, whereas JSW, we follow a 4 point rating scale. There was a company with which I have worked previously as well. They used to follow 3 point rating scale. Okay, and then there are companies where there is no rating scale and it is working for them. I know there is a counter question. Okay, how do you do rewards and all of that? Maybe for some other time, if somebody is interested, they can reach out to me. But the thing is this, you have to first understand that what kind of industry you are in, how is your company making money. That's a very very important aspect when you want to do a performance measurement or a performance management. So whether you want to do a rating scale, you want to have more large, so 4 5 rating scale or 4 rating scale or 3 or none, will depend on what kind of industry that is. What do you value more? So for example, in tech kind of a setup, in IT kind of a setup, they are more skill driven industry. Today whatever the skill is selling like a hot cake could become vanilla the very in 2 3 years of the time frame. They have a very large base of client which is dependent on certain certain type of skill, whereas some very few client could be there who requires another kind of skill, but that is upcoming business for them. So this whole rating scale, rating model, the performance assessment model will be important factor will be what kind of industry you are in and what exactly your industry requires for today as well as for tomorrow. Are you a skill dependent, are you a expertise dependent? So based on those things it will be required what kind of population you have, what kind of cultural setup you have, what is the vision of the company, and how you see what is the so for example, there are companies who identify the bottom performer and they ask them to go in the very same year. But there are companies like ours for whom those bottom performance is still very good actually. So do we need to take those steps? And I will go back on the very same statement that I made in the beginning of the session, that not necessarily everything that world is doing is good for you, not necessarily that what all practices you have is actually bad. There could be something which would be working for you may not work for someone else, and based on that you can decide what is the rating scale that you want to keep or may not want to keep. The other question which somebody has asked, that at JSW, what do you focus more on, top talent, bottom performers, or fence sitters? Okay, it's like answering the question if you ask a parent that which is whom do you invest more, do you love the first kid or the second kid, or the one who creates the most troubles. It is not like that. It's just that the treatment to all of these category of employees will be different. What would motivate your top talent might not be the same thing that will work for a bottom performer. So if you have a differentiated reward philosophy, we will be able to manage all these group, and you will be able to optimize their talent or their potential or productivity, including their cost optimally, if you are managing them differently. But if you're managing them through the same yardstick, then probably that is somewhere you might fall in that crack of managing everybody in the same way. Differentiation is the human need. Everybody who performs well want to be differentiated because that's the way they think that their performance is getting respected. So it is very important that you have a separate strategy for your top talent. It is very important that you invest very carefully when it comes to your bottom performers. How much of time investment, training investment, cost investment you'd want to put for your bottom performers is also very very important aspect. Having said that, it is also important that your complete process should be in a way that the performances are getting measured and not the people. Most of the time, instead of performance, we put people into categories and then we decide a course of action for those people, and that's where we make mistake. If we can somehow bring those, highlight those performances of what is acceptable, what is not, and what kind of treatment you want to give your top to middle to bottom performer, I think that should what your reward philosophy should be doing. So that's all from me. I think we are over time.
Also running out of time, and yeah, Asmani is back.
Yes. I thank you, Rupam, and thank you, Mahesh, for your fantastic insights. I'm sure our audience had a lot of takeaways. At this point, I would also like to thank our partner for this masterclass, Darwin Box. Darwin Box is the leading provider of cloud based human resource management software. Their SaaS platform engages and empowers employees across the entire lifecycle with a smarter, simpler, and mobile first HR tech experience powered by artificial intelligence and machine learning. They serve over 650 organizations and 1.5 million employees across 90 plus countries, including large conglomerates and fast growing technology unicorns. With this, a big thank you to all our attendees and a big thank you to Mahesh and Rupam once again. To our attendees, please don't forget to provide your feedback in the survey link that we have shared in the chat section because your input matters. Stay tuned for many more such exciting conversations. Thank you, everyone, and stay safe. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.